All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March 2022 DAG monthly meeting. It's a pleasure to see everyone. My name is Eli Storch, the chair of the Design Advocacy Group. And today we're going to be talking about the intersection of art and environmental activism. We did have a program adjustment. If you're here to see Rebecca Chan, she will not be presenting today. There was a conflict and she will be back with us later in the summer. So the opportunity is still there, but we have a wonderful speaker who has come to talk to us, and we're thrilled and thankful for her time and expertise. So as we jump into it, as always, please stay on mute while we're going. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to message me. And I will do my best to assist you as we go through this. Typically, our DAG meetings have been off the record, but with the ability to go on Zoom and share with a broader audience, we've made the decision to record them. And going back now to September of 2020, there are all sorts of programs on our website in the events tab that you can go check out, walk through a YouTube link that's in that events page. So go enjoy some of our past programs and see what's on that website. So if you have any announcements, any exhibitions, any events, things that are coming up around the city that you'd like to share with us, please put that in the chat and I'll call on you to jump in and say a few words about it. But in the meantime, speaking of programming, Marcia, do you want to let us know what's going on for the coming months for DAG?
Sure. Thanks, Eli. So as an informed group, you're probably aware that there is a 20-degree difference in temperature between the hottest places and the coolest in Philadelphia. And because heat is a cause of serious illness and death, Hinge Collective created the Philly Tree Plan, which aims to bring the benefit of trees to communities that need them the most. This very ambitious project's going to be discussed on April 21st by Alexa Bossi, a founding principal of Hinge Collective, and Ari Miller, its director of design. By the time we meet next month, most of our urban trees will be fully green in many of our neighborhoods. We hope that eventually all people can enjoy the benefits of living in a tree-planted community. So see you next month. Eli?
Yep, so that is up on our website. Please go click on there to get yourself a free ticket to that. We most recently held an evening event talking about the ongoing work of our DAG Streeteries working group. That was a really wonderful evening that Kat helped me organize, and go take a look at that. It's a little different than a standard DAG meeting. We were lucky to have a really wonderful panel on that. Dave Berryman from the Planning Department and the Arts Commission, Ben Fletcher from Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association, Mario Gentile from Shift Space Design. Who do we else? We had the director from Frida Cafe join us, and yeah, David, and Prima Gupta from the Center City District. So it was a really lively ongoing conversation. And DAG's Streeteries Working Group will be releasing our first published statement at the end of the month, and then we'll be moving ahead into some design and graphic design guidelines for the summer as that goes on. So please, if you're interested, check that out. You can reach out to dagfellow@gmail.com if you want to get more involved. And generally, if you want to get more involved, specifically with that group, as well as our Waterfronts Task Force, they're continuing to work along both the Delaware and the Schuylkill River to get things done, to work with the Central Delaware Advocacy Group, and are looking for new members on those task forces. So if you have any interest, dagfellow@gmail.com. We'll get you hooked in, we'll get you all the information and get you involved with what we're working on. So let's dive right in. We have a wonderful presentation today. There will be a Q&A at the end. So as you have questions, please please put them right in the chat there so we can make sure to address them. But I wanted to pass over to Marcia Moss, not just our programs director, but a longtime DAG steering committee member who knows all the ins and outs and goings on in the arts community, to introduce our speaker. Marcia?
Thank you. Thanks, Eli. Well, we are thrilled to welcome Diane Burko to DAG. Diane is a renowned artist and an activist, and she is here to talk about the connection between those two roles. Diane's art focuses on monumental geological episodes. To that end, she has investigated locations on the ground and in the air, from open door helicopters and planes, traveling from temperate zones of America to Western Europe, from rainforests to glaciers and active volcanoes. Her art merges a vision that is at once panoramic, intimate, and provocative. We think of Diane as a Philadelphia treasure, and she is, but in fact, she was born in Brooklyn. She chose to remain in our city after earning an MFA in painting at Penn. Currently, her paintings are represented at the Philadelphia Museum of Art and in over 25 museums and public collections across the country. Diane has been awarded residences in Giverny, the Rockefeller Conference Center, and in Bellagio, Italy, and by the Arctic Circle Group, and in America, Samoa, and so on. She has also received many prestigious national and local awards and honors. And I must add that her most recent exhibition, Seeing Climate Change at the American University Museum, was cited by the New York Times as one of the best shows of 2021. That's an awesome recognition. So I'd like to introduce Diane Burko.
Thank you, Marcia. That was an awesome introduction. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, if I can do that, Eli. Just a minute. Share.
Yeah, shouldn't be an issue.
I see it here. I see. Okay. Share. Let me get rid of this. Forgive me, I have a sort of crowded screen, but we'll get right to the PowerPoint in a moment. Okay, slideshow. Here we go. Well, thank you. Specifically, most importantly, my good friend Marcia, who I've known for quite a number of years, and we've been through the trenches in lots of different ways over the years. I'm really thrilled to talk to you all because I have a deep love for design and architecture and dabble in it with my husband, Richard Ryan, as well. I'm a architect manqué, I like to think, and a lot of our good friends are architects. So I'm going to do what we said I'm going to do, is give you a kind of overview of my journey from landscape artist to environmental activist, environmental artist. But, you know, I've had a long career, so it didn't start that way. I was a landscape artist for many, many years before I became an environmental artist and then an environmental activist. And my activism isn't just in the streets, it's also in other venues. I'm always communicating about climate change whenever I have an exhibition. As a matter of fact, I won't have an exhibition unless the institution promises to have programming that's about the environment and climate change and brings in a broader audience. And these images here are from my most recent exhibition, where not only did the American University promise that, excuse me, but also helped organize a symposium. We had a 3-day symposium that was university-wide and national, that spoke to issues of climate change. And I speak to many different kinds of groups, universities, of course, but RS Synagogue in 2018 and conferences like the one in Reykjavik. So I'm out there always kind of speaking and exchanging ideas with many different kinds of people. I think it's important to realize that environmental advocacy is not a new idea. And we can go all the way back to Thomas Cole. Okay, there he is, worried about clear cutting way back in 1836. And there are other artists with each century that has been involved in these issues. Thomas Moran, one of the artists that went west so that they could show us what was going on out there before photography. He helped found the first national parks, Yellowstone. And then a century later, you have someone like Ansel Adams, who was extremely active in the conservation movement. But this advocacy is more urgent today, and it continues today with a whole panoply of artists. And I want to share with you some of their practices, which are very different from mine. Photography, well, I do photography, but Ed Bernstein is a wonderful example of someone who has done so much in terms of extraction issues and many other issues around the world with his photographs and also his films. And I think Olafur Eliasson is another one who, over the decades, I mean, this is 2003, I actually saw that show at the Tate Modern. Way back then, he was talking about it, and he continued to talk about it. This was at COP 24, 25 in Paris. And this is a very, very recent project that he's done in Italy. And the idea here is he's really combining art and science. And eventually, it's been happening, this glacier is melting. And this piece of structure will interact with that melt. And we shall see what will happen with that. I'm just going to give you some more examples of artists in the most recent times who are dealing with it. This collaborative group, that line is about where sea level will be based on real modeling. Another important piece. And I think this one is really the most, for me, compelling piece that's happened in terms of getting an audience that's different from the usual audience. And this is why I think art is such a wonderful vehicle for communicating to the public about these issues. I mean, I did not get to the Venice Biennale that year, but I had friends who did. And they told me people were crying. I mean, it was extremely moving to hear this opera. And I was lucky enough, like I'm sure a lot of the people here today were, to actually see this production in Philadelphia just last year. So art in many forms, film, dance, theater, opera, painting, photography, it all is a way to communicate these issues. And as I said earlier, I'm a painter. My way is basically through painting, but it's also through installation. And what was so challenging and exciting about this recent show I had is that the space allowed me, because of COVID actually, to have time to work with the curators and collaborate on a very deep level about how the public is walking through this space. What are they confronting? And how are the other ways that I, as an artist, can communicate these issues? And so this is like at the end of the hall when you walk in. It's another space that's an 8-foot by 15-foot painting back there. But it wasn't also only about painting. I had this scroll, this video to the left, that represented a collection of newspaper articles that I've been collecting forever. And we, with my assistant, we figured out a way to not put all of them, but some of them on a scroll so that people could kind of see it, stop and look, maybe go back and get the information in a very didactic way, as well as in a more experiential way. I'm also a videographer, but I don't edit. So I have had wonderful collaborators, young students, U of Art students, another assistant of mine who went to Bard, and we've worked on thing. Alana Rebick did this one with me. This was my most recent video about ice. And there was also a video I did for the National Academy of Sciences, which was about reefs. So I tried to, within my own practice, delve into different ways, experiment with ways that I can communicate. Well, like I said earlier, it didn't start there. It started with my just being involved in the landscape. And there's almost a 50-year career here. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to show you all that career, but I'm just, cherry picking a few images that I think give you a highlight. I never show these images, but being that I was talking to an architectural group, I tried to think, do I have any architecture or structures in all those pieces I've made? And I did do a whole series, thanks to a Pennsylvania Arts Council grant, on the rivers of Pennsylvania, where I flew over many rivers, including Three River Stadium. And so this is my hats to you, designers, and this is the only architecture I could find in my paintings, because basically my work is about the landscape. Marcia mentioned my residency in Giverny. It was a 6-month residency. It was incredible and allowed me to really focus in a way I've never focused before. Well, here's another nod to you people out there. I did do a public art piece, a 1% for art, with my husband, Richard Ryan, and here we are presenting to the RDA. And some of you might know some of the people in that photograph. I did get the commission and had to rent a studio on 13th Street to create these pieces. Had lots of friends visiting. Marcia, I don't know if you ever saw that photograph. And there's the install shot. After that, I took a trip to Costa Rica and discovered the phenomenon of volcanoes. Thanks to the Leeway Grant, I was able to then follow this new phenomenon that I knew nothing about growing up in Brooklyn, of volcanoes. And I traveled a great deal. This was the Leeway show at the Art Alliance for all the winners of that year. And I flew in a helicopter, hanging out, photographing in Hawaii, photographing over the Aeolian Islands, winding up in Iceland. That was my last destination over about a 4-year project. And paintings came from those, which then, of course, always results in an exhibition. This exhibition was a traveling show. It started at Tufts and it moved on to the Michener. And that was my aha moment. That's when I changed my whole practice in 2006 because of this painting that was in the show. This painting wasn't in the other show because they didn't have room, but the curator realized she had more room and said, we did all these Iceland paintings here, but didn't you do ice and snow way back in the 70s? And yes, I did. And we located this large painting, put it in the show. And as I'm walking through the show, talking to people about everything in the show, I'm thinking about the ice and the snow and wondering if it's still there. Now, why was I thinking that? Well, 2006 was a year when a lot was going on in terms of climate change. Climate change was in the air. I was aware of it, and it just totally turned me around. I realized that if I'm going to be an artist that cares about the environment, I have to do something about it. And I try to find a way to do it through various strategies, still keeping the authenticity of who I am. And this was a show that sort of represented this whole idea of repeat photography, which glaciologists have been using ever since they had photography. Resulted in another Philadelphia show. And the next strategy that I used was recessional lines, another way of measuring. Melt, and now glaciers are live, they recede and they recede, but they also can go this way. mostly they're receding. And so I did a number of paintings about that. The aerial view continued to be important, and that led me to LANDSAT imagery. LANDSAT imagery is just beautiful. So of course, as an artist, I'm very taken by it, but I had to figure out a way to use it in a way that made sense in terms of my whole message. Here's an example of an actual photograph from NASA and a painting that came from it that was part of a 4-part series, and here it is too. So early on, I was going everywhere. I was photographing myself, but when I got into this climate change mode, at the beginning, I was using everyone else's photographs because I needed the information, I needed to learn. Finally, I realized I got to get back out there. I have to see these things for myself. So I went back to Grinnell Glacier, which I had painted way before I ever saw it, flew over it, climbed, and that began my whole investigation of glaciers. And it took me everywhere. It took me to the Antarctic. That's from the Antarctic. It also took me to the Arctic. This was a grant that both Richard and I got. We were the only married couple on this residency, where we sailed on a 3-masted barkentine all around Svalbard. Svalbard is 400 miles north of Norway and close to the North Pole, certainly in the Arctic Circle. This is a shot of my flying over the first glacier that I ever walked on. And thanks to this great scientist, Jack Kohler, I was able to participate with their investigations, and I learned a great deal. And there's me on top of the world. And of course, I did a photographic series of all that. Well, once I got to the Arctic, I wanted to do more. I wanted to see more of the Arctic. And so we went to Greenland, not in August 2021, but this is an image of how hot it is right now. We were there in 2014. And we went to Ilulissat Glacier, which is the fastest moving glacier in the Northern Hemisphere. And actually the icebergs from there are credited with sinking the Titanic. The following year, 2014-15, we embarked at the end of 2014. Richard and I were invited to be educators in a nonprofit organization called Students on Ice. And we went back to Antarctica. I mean, I would go, at a drop of a hat, but there was a reason to go back to Antarctica. And that was because after the ship docked back at Ushuaia, we wanted to visit some more glaciers. And so we embarked to the ice fields of Argentina. And that was another incredible experience, basically resulting in a lot of photography, my 40 by 60 images, which I continue to do. That also led to a whole series that I called Deep Time, where I had a series of images that came from Greenland and then were sort of paired with other images that came from other glaciers that I had visited. Fox Glacier was the last glacier I visited in 2017. And all that information is what I use to translate, to inform me in my studio. And so here we have a quick survey, one a year, of what my studio looks like as I'm working through different images. Oh, I should point out those 2 paintings on the right are part of a 4-painting series that's at the convention center, in their permanent collection. 2015 was 2016 was the end of really my working on these pieces, resulting in a show in 2017 at the Walton Arts Center and a book, and I shamelessly promote my catalogs and books. You can find them on Amazon. When we went to see that 2017 New Zealand glaciers, we were already down there. We were near Australia. And so, of course, we went to Australia. And one of the motivations of going to Australia was to fly over the Great Barrier Reef. And I did a photo series on that. that was one of the moments, when coral reefs were in the news a lot, and I knew that was another issue that I wanted to try to tackle because it was another example of climate change. I was lucky enough to get involved in a grant proposal, which we got, which was supposed to get us to all the public parks of America that have coral reefs. We got to one, and here's an early studio shot of how I was thinking of how am I going to paint these reefs? I had no idea. Okay, and this sort of brings you into the artist's dilemma, but also the artist's joy, because the great thing about being an artist for me is being challenged and try to figure things out. Eventually, I figured out that horizontal was better than vertical, and it really helped me right before we started on this Pacific adventure, which led to many different places. But we started we were on Hawaii, and I visited the Hawaiian Institute of Marine Biology, which is one of my other practices, always visiting and interacting and collaborating with different researchers. And so here I'm learning about the confocal microscope. From Hawaii, we went to our destination, which was in the middle of nowhere, American Samoa. And after we were 2 weeks in American Samoa, we went back to Hawaii, and I shot some more, and we had other experiences. All those experiences came back to my studio in 2018 as I was preparing for a show with the National Academy of Sciences. And this is what the studio looked like at that time. And those images on the right, this is just a GIFs to give you an idea of my lenticular work. I've been doing this a lot with Anna Tass, who is a lenticular expert. And basically, you're looking at a flat piece that moves as you move across it. If you go to my website, you can see many other editions that I've done over the years, including just last year. This is like a little demonstration to show you what we're doing. We're making an animation. So as this moves, and what is this? It's oil and water you can think of, but basically it was baby oil with pigment thrown into thinned soap, dish soap. And we would just keep shooting different images so that we could get what we wanted as an animation. There were about 30 stills that we put together. That led to my first video because I realized this is so cool, I got to make a video. And the video combined, this is a 12-minute video, which you can see on my website. And what it does is it combines a lot of issues, not just that. This is installation shots, another catalog. Work continued with my working in glacial reefs. And actually, I'm thinking of all these things coming at me. These paintings in process are now installed at 2400 Market Street. So if you go into the lobby, you can see these pieces plus 6 others. There are 7 pieces in all devoted to issues of climate change with text that talks to people about climate change. The World Map series was the next big project. Studio shots. Each one of these panels is 50 by 88. And it just started by my finding a map of all the glaciers in the world. And then I found a map of all the reefs in the world. And they were installed in this exhibition. Around that time, there was a huge heat wave, as there's been almost every summer. And I have good friends in Paris who were telling me about it. And then, of course, there were the Australian fires. All that information resulted in my making Summer Heat. And there it is in the exhibition. This was another piece of the exhibition. This is called the Coral Triangle, and sort of was done at the same time. So this is early 2020 when these paintings are done. You might recall March, April, May, COVID started, the pandemic was upon us, and I didn't plan on it, but I started responding to that. And actually, isn't that the same thing as climate change? It's all about how everything is connected, as Alexander von Humboldt would say, right? It's a web. It's a web of life, and we're all connected. And the more we can realize that, the better off we would be. Even though I already had done this big series of these 50 by 88s, once the pandemic hit, I realized I had another map to do, and this was the COVID spread. And so that was an addition. At that time, I made a lot of studies about a large painting about the issues that were going on. This one was about Black Lives Matter. This I called Red, White, and Blue. And these are all studies that led to that big painting that I think is next, but we'll find out. Yeah, and then I was working on this big painting at the same time. These are 3 panels that were each 98 by 60. And thus becoming the 8-foot by 15-foot piece. The show was up. It was up from August through December. And I'm still working, you know, the show's up. I got work to do. And what started interesting me was the Amazon rainforest. I think you might get the picture here that I don't plan ahead. I'm kind of what you call a serendipitous person. Things hit me, I get excited and curious, and stuff happens. So this painting was one of 3 black, and I really thought those were going to be in the show. There was no room for them. And when I started looking at the painting at the Amazon rainforest, it hit me that it was huge. I'm always looking at maps, but I couldn't believe how big that painting was. Not the painting, but the area. That area of the Amazon rainforest is as big as the United States of America east of the Rockies. It covers 8 countries. And so I started making a diptych, and then later on in the year, in January 2022, it became sort of like a triptych. Each one of these are 5 feet squares. And I'm bringing you almost right up to date, although there's new stuff in the studio I didn't photograph for you. But here we are moving right up to January, where I started making more studies about these issues. And I started learning more. I started doing much more in terms of researching extraction and mining issues and how the indigenous communities are totally being destroyed, as they usually are. We can go back to our own history. These are 2 paintings that speak about a certain issue, and that issue is a highway BR 163, which literally goes through, and you can see it up there in that little map, it goes right through the Amazon. And as it goes through, you have logging, you have destruction, and you have less trees. The Amazon forests are the lungs of the world. They are one of the most valuable ecosystems that we have, discovered by even before Humboldt went there. Darwin spoke about it. I mean, it's a valuable, valuable piece of real estate, and it helps keep us alive. So it's a real big issue for me. To the right, you might wonder, why is there a glacier painting? Well, because of my advocacy and my wanting to do public engagement, I, in 2018, did that Road of Shalom show, and I've just agreed to do a show at the Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church. They have a brand new gallery. It's quite beautiful. And for Earth Day, Earth Month, Earth Week, there will be a show of my work that's very small, like 600 square feet. I think this one will be in it, and it's covering different territory. So this is a painting that is from 2015 that I was touching up, and is also going to be in that exhibition. When I first did these 2, I put them horizontally, and then I changed my mind and I thought they looked better vertically. And then I had another idea. You might notice there's wood to the left. I've been playing around a lot with burnt wood and integrating them into my process. And so this is the way I think it's going to look from now on. So you're getting a preview that no one else has seen. And I think that kind of gives you a quick review of what I've been up to, what my journey is like. And I welcome, I hope, a really, exciting discussion with all of you. Oh yes, I've been promoting my new book. See, there it is, Diane Burko, Seeing Climate Change. It's on Amazon, but you can, on my website, you can also order it through Artbook, and whatever we can do that's not on Amazon, it's probably better, if you don't mind my saying. So that's it. And Kat, I hope you are going to ask me some questions.
Hi, everybody. Kat Kendon here. And I just want to say, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. You can drop them in the chat and we'll get them over to Diane. But I did have a few to start. I was just curious, you mentioned that your husband is a landscape architect, and I was just curious what that partnership is like and about his influence with your work.
Oh, I don't think I could be where I am without Richard. Richard's my second husband. We've been together 30 years. And he went to Penn later than I did. He graduated in 97. He went back. He started out as an artist, sculptor, and became, way back last century, most artists could build things. They knew how to make things. And so Richard was a contractor and did what artists do, mostly guys more than women, but that's what he did. And then he decided to go back to landscape architecture because he loved the landscape. He grew up in the Mojave Desert and he knew a lot. And so when I first got involved in volcanoes, he said, well, we have to go see Mount St. Helens. He went to school, he went to Reed. So he was actually there in 1980 when it exploded. So we've collaborated a great deal with, he's taught me a lot about geology and archaeology as well. I should tell you, David, his first wife was an archaeologist and went to Bryn Mawr. So we have that kind of combination of interests, and we do collaborate. When we first got together, we bought a condo on 19th and Spruce, where the old diner used to be. And we got we bought a floor, and it was 2,400 square feet. He totally gutted it and we designed it. And that gave us courage 15 years later or so to buy a property on Juniper Street we live on Juniper between Spruce and Pine. It was a 2-story office building. He gutted it, we designed it, and we added a 3rd floor, and we like to call it our last house. It has an elevator, studio, and garage. So design and doing projects together has really been a hallmark of our relationship in terms of exploring, but also in creating.
Great. Okay, another question. This is a joint one for me and one of the artists in the group. Is at the end of the presentation, I noticed some sculptural elements coming into the work. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about that. And in the meantime, there's a question from the group of how does paint influence the work and why must they be paintings?
Well, I've been around a while. I began in painting. I love painting. I still think it has relevance. And it's my language, it's sort of my first mother tongue. So I've expanded, photography came in about 25 years ago. I mean, I always photographed, but when digital came in, I made serious photographs. And the same thing with video. I guess if I was born 50 years later, I'd be a videographer maybe. So I embrace new media, but I don't forget about my roots. And I still think painting is a way, look at Julie Mahitru as an example. I mean, painting is a way of communicating and it's just my way. So painting is there. Now, sculpture. I started putting wood in my paintings. I'm trying to remember when, probably 2020. And again, it was serendipitous. We have a place in Bucks County and we grill. And during COVID, we ate outside a lot with friends. And we had these cedar planks this is really inside info. We had cedar planks that Richard would put the fish on because I'm a vegetarian or pescatarian. And then you'd have these pieces of wood that were beautiful. I'd clean them up. And then I started sort of integrating them into my work. And then that was in the summer and the spring. Then winter came of 2020 when we were all still inside. So what was I doing out in Bucks County? I was building fires, and fires led to charcoal. Fires led to burnt wood. And there was burning going on in the forests of California and in Australia. So it all kind of came together, and it was sort of a natural evolution. And if you look carefully, I guess you can see it on my website, on that big 8-foot by 15-foot painting, there is a piece of wood that's put into the painting. So it's just part of what I'm doing now. One thing leads to another.
Another question from Jim in the group. Have you planned to revisit any of the volcanoes or reefs that you've already visited? Talk about ongoing changes.
Well, I note the ongoing changes through the internet and through the scientists that I, created such relationships over the years. I'm someone who always wants to go forward. So I want to get to the Amazon. I want to get to Manaus. And that's our goal, maybe in 2023. If I had an opportunity, I mean, if I'm in South America, we spent a month in Chile in 2019 and also went to Rapa Nui. If I had the opportunity, maybe I would go back to Chile or Peru to look at some glaciers. But my focus really now is the Amazon basin. Yeah.
So thinking about those travel plans and saying, if I had the opportunity, how do you get funding for those projects?
I've been very fortunate. I mentioned the Leeway grant. That was a $50,000 grant. And sort of like got lucky. I turned 50 when I got the grant. So, that was a nice surprise. And that really funded 4 years worth of travel. And the funding really goes towards the flying. Okay, because, that hiring helicopters and fixed wing planes, et cetera. So that was a big grant. The Independence Foundation, I got a $10,000 grant from them when I did the Arctic Circle residency. And that helped to pay for my contributing to the helicopter rides I had with the Norwegian Polar Institute people, because I tried to do it on my own. That's when I applied for the grant. And when I was doing the budget, I had to find out, well, how much does it cost? I'm not exaggerating. In Norway, it's 5,000 plus an hour to fly. So that was outrageous. But the person I was speaking to in Norway, Oslo, she said, actually it was Trunza. She said, well, you might try to contact the Norwegian Polar Institute and go with them. And that's indeed what happened. So the $10,000, a lot of it was donated to those flights. I haven't gotten any other money grants lately. If anyone has any suggestions, please do share.
Share to all of us. There's another question here that I love from Xenia, which is, have you thought about mycorrhizal connections? It's an interesting tangent on your work.
Mycorrhizal connections as in terms of plants?
Yeah, the like fungal network between plants.
Yeah, I certainly know about that in terms of our gardening in Bucks County. I don't know how I would do that. I'd have to look at it, think about it, and be challenged. Right now, every area or every topic of interest that's sparked my curiosity leads to another way of figuring out how to make work. So that's an interesting thing. I was just at Wesleyan for a 3-day gig, and one of the students there raised something I never thought about, which is the rainforest cloud, that's over the rainforest. So that's something I'm now exploring. So I'll take that into consideration. Thank you. I'll take consideration.
I'm going to read this question from David. He says, your work, like all great art, has the power to make us see what might seem invisible or at least unnoticed. How do you do that?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess, my sharing with you is a way of showing you my journey. I just respond to things. And I think all artists do that, don't we? Architects, designers, you have a problem, you have an idea, you have a passion for something, and you kind of figure it out, not knowing what you're really going to do, but sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And I didn't show you any of the mistakes.
Next time.
Right.
Since this group is fundamentally architects, I'm just curious to hear more about if you have a favorite architectural space or just more thoughts on how your work overlays with architecture.
That was a really cool question. I've never been asked that before. And I was jotting down, gee, that's an interesting question. And I just quickly, off the top of my head, I wrote Notre Dame, the Salk Institute, which I saw when I was on the West Coast, and the PSFS building, just because I studied it when I was in art history and, have watched it evolve into the Lowe's. And I think the new addition to PMA is quite something too. So that literally is off the top of my head, some of the architecture. The Venturi House, I mean, I can go on and on, they just.
What is it about those spaces that speaks to you?
The awesomeness of them, especially, I thought the Salk Institute really blew my mind. It was just, again, I had read about it. I had met Louis Kahn when I was at Penn, and, seen my architect and all that stuff, but seeing it, the light, I think it was the light. It was the light in the space, which is just.
I can understand why you'd be drawn to that, where that's a space, like where the architectural space is inviting you to see the environment.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. That must be why. Yeah.
Okay, so you named a number of Philadelphia projects there, and I'm just curious a little bit more about your experience in Philadelphia. I know you're part of the Art Commission. Do you want to speak about that a little bit?
It was many, many years ago. Well, I'll tell you, my experience in Philadelphia started with my couldn't understanding why there were no tall buildings. I'm from New York City. And so it's been a positive experience to see that they finally went over the Billy Penn hat and started having a skyline. So I've watched the city really evolve. I lived in West Philadelphia in the 70s, and that was not a pretty place, and neither was Center City. So I am very proud to be a Philadelphia resident, although it's, they say when you can take a girl out of Brooklyn, but you can never take the Brooklyn out of the girl. And I think I'm still a New Yorker, very much in the sense of speed. I remember when I used to run up the stairs. I taught at community college for almost 30 years. And it used to be in the Snellenberger building, which is before my time, but I was told that I would literally trip over the people as I got out of the trolley because they were so slow. So that's an experience of speed. But I've really watched this city grow in wonderful ways. Center City. Now, I lived in West Philly for more than 20 years. And then I moved to Center City where I live now, and I love Center City. It's a walking city. It's a little bit like Paris, not as grand. Actually, Paris is my favorite city. But I'm happy with the way things have evolved. They could be better, but.
Like anything specific about your involvement with the Arts Commission during that time, or a project with them that is notable? Or
well, I can tell you that I was only on the Art Commission for my first term with Ed Rendell, because he took me into his office and said, I don't think you should be on it for another term. And we knew why. I spoke my mind. I had no hidden agenda. When something sucked, I said so. And I might have ruffled a few political feathers, people who were using a sign at a stadium for public art, and I didn't think that was a good idea. things. But I've learned to be much more diplomatic over the years.
It's a skill.
It is.
I have one last question here, unless anybody else wants to jump in the chat with something else. Can you talk about any sacrifices that you've had to make for your work?
Oh God, yes, I've made personal sacrifices. You could ask my daughter, I'm sure she would attest to that. Scheduling, motherhood. I have a daughter and 2 grandchildren. And I don't think I was always there. I was so touched by Ketanji Jackson's statement when she, first spoke and spoke to that. It's very hard to be an active working woman and a mother and take care of the house, especially in the 70s when feminism was burgeoning, but it wasn't where it is today, where young women I know have a better balance, I think, although they're still stressed. It's still in their head, the lunches and the doctor appointments, et cetera. Especially with the pandemic, I really feel for young mothers today and what they had to go through the last 2 years, including my own daughter.
Great.
Oh, and other stresses. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, we're getting towards the end of our questions here. If you have more to share, please do.
Well, unless there's another, I see, would you be interested in finding a way to have an exhibit in Latin America? Absolutely. Invite me. Another point, I used to be with the Locks Gallery, which I'm sure all of you know. I was actually with them for 36 years, but I'm not. I'm an independent artist now, so I need all the help I can get.
Great. Well, I think that wraps up our questions from our audience, but I just want to say thank you. We really appreciate learning about your work and you sharing with all of us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much. This was wonderful. We typically, if anyone wants to turn on their camera and do the virtual round of applause, we do appreciate you taking the time and sharing so much with us. We'll be putting this online in the coming days. So if anyone wants to share this with friends and colleagues, please do so. And we will all be back in April to talk about the Philadelphia Street Plan. We've got streeteries. If you want to get involved with DAG, email dagfellow@gmail.com. And have a wonderful Thursday, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Diane.